Welcome to Killer Women with your host, best-selling author Danielle Girard. The Killer Women Vodcast is pleased to be a part of the Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. To learn more about Danielle and her books, visit her at www.daniellegirard.com, and to access all of our vodcasts, go to youtube.com/Authors on the Air. And now, Danielle's next killer woman.
So welcome so much to the second episode of the Killer Women podcast. I am here with my special guest, amazingly talented and a wonderful friend and human, Kimberly Bell. So Kimberly is the USA Today and internationally best-selling author of 7 novels, including her recently released My Darling Husband, which came out on December 28th, and The Marriage Lie, a Goodreads Choice Awards semi-finalist for Best Mystery and Thriller. Her books have been published in more than a dozen languages, wow, and have been optioned for film and television. A graduate of Agnes Scott College, Kimberly divides her time between Atlanta and Amsterdam. That is an exciting life. Kimberly, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I love it. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy to be here. And we're going to talk about My Darling Husband, which is your newest release. And some fun descriptors of My Darling Husband are unmissable, twisty page turner, gripping, intense, and utterly binge-worthy. And I definitely agree. My Darling Husband was a one-sitting read for me, and I was lucky enough to get my hands on an ARC, and I'm very grateful for that. And if you haven't seen also the gorgeous cover, and you've got it, and it is fabulous. That woman, she's the whole.
Yeah.
It's a really
she's
good
scary
look.
looking, isn't she? Right?
She is. She's well, and just like in the book, she's worthy. So let's just start with tell us a little about this. You are really a diva of domestic suspense, and so before we dig into sort of where these ideas come from, and you're hopefully not your personal experience, which I'm sure they're not. Tell those of us who haven't read the book yet. Tell us a little bit about My Darling Husband.
Sure. So My Darling Husband is the story about a woman named Jade, and she's the mother of 2 kids. They're 7 and 9. And she's a stay-at-home mom. She's coming home one day with the 2 kids on the back seat, and in all the chaos of getting them out of the car, they're arguing and throwing goldfish and whatever. She doesn't notice the man in the shadows of her garage, and he's wearing a mask and holding a gun. And he basically forces his way inside and holds her and her 2 children for a crazy ransom sum that he demands from her husband, Cam. And he has to, come up with this money by 7 p.m. or else.
And that is right. And it's actually one of the things I have to say I love best about this book, which is new for you, for you at least, is the children. Baxter and Beatrix in particular, who's a violin prodigy and so clever and such a fun part of this plot. So, and we'll talk about that a little bit, because I love that. But I want to talk about moving back. This is your 7th book, and for the books of yours I've read, it's really so much not just about domestic drama, because there's kids in a couple of your books, but most often we see you sort of really dig into marriage. And I know, you're a mother of 2, although I know your kids, like my kids, are a little older than Baxter.
Big and grown, yeah.
Yes. Well, thank goodness, right? Oh, those days.
Out of the house.
Yes. And you're also married, I know, a long time to a very handsome Dutchman, which is why you end up in Amsterdam so often, which is amazing. So tell us about that. Tell us about like the inspiration for My Darling Husband, and then maybe we'll talk about sort of more in general this domestic things that capture your attention.
Yeah, you're right. I do kind of tend to gravitate towards the marriage issue, and I think it's just because there are so many ways that story can go, and it's such a recognizable relationship. Even if you're not married, you can imagine what it would be like to live with someone to fully trust them, to think you know what's going on in their heads. And then all of a sudden you discover that, there's a secret, there's a lie, there's, some sort of betrayal. So it just feels to me I don't know if I'll ever get tired of that. It's not really a premise, but, just kind of jumping off point for a story. So knowing that about, that's kind of where I always start a story. But when it was time for me to pitch, because I'm under contract for multiple books. And so I had to pitch a story basically for this book. And I kept pitching idea after idea that they shot down. And for a million different reasons, they already had something too similar that was about to come out, or they didn't think it was, the right kind of story for me. All different sorts of reasons. But at one point, I remember saying to my editor, I flipped it back to her and I said, what would you like to see from me? What are the stories that you think, would be a good one for me to tackle? But also, they see books that are many years before they hit the shelves, right? So they kind of know where the market is going. And every editor I've ever met has a wish list of stuff they wanted to receive. So she sent me like 5, maybe 7 different ideas. And one of them was a mother protecting her home and her family from danger. And as soon as she said that, this idea kind of plopped in my head and I was like, home invasion, got it, going.
That is, and let's talk about Jade, because another thing about your books, which I love, is that both the male and the female characters are fully formed. We have this, you hear stories sometimes, and obviously as women and wives, we oftentimes tell only one side of the story, right? Which is the female side. But, but basically your books really delve into both the points of view and both the sort of the reasons that the characters do things. But Jade, of course, we're rooting for her from the get-go, because she is the one who is going to save her children. And I love actually that this is no like damsel in distress who's going to be saved by some white knight. She is in there like, how do we say, how can I save my family? And she's a force to be reckoned with. So I think that's an interesting thing too. The stories that we've heard traditionally are oftentimes about, women being saved or outside help. And so when your thought process, she did some very clever things, and she had done some very clever things that were well sort of set up for her to be able to help her family. And so what was your thought process in making sure you weren't doing the sort of the white knight thing? Because I think, as your readership, we want to see these characters save themselves.
Yeah. And, I tend to, like, thinking back on my other books as well, my main characters really are the type of women who maybe don't realize how strong they are, but when they're put in a position where they have to be strong and they have to be brave, they really kind of step up and discover their own strength. So I'm thinking back of all my books. I don't think I've ever written any other sort of character. So, that's just the kind of women I like to read about. And so I tend to write them as well. But you're right. Especially in a premise like this, when your children are in danger and you're in the same house, but you're even separated, because at one point, they're tied to chairs across the hall and she's in a different room. And, that I think even if you're not a mother, you can understand like what that would be like. And so I think in that moment, you get really clever and really brave, because it's not about, your own life. You're there to save your children.
100%. I absolutely felt that. And let's just talk also about a sort of more junior woman in the story, Miss Beatrix, because she manages to escape not once but twice from the home invader. And how fun was that? She's what, 9?
9, yeah.
How fun was that to write? And I'm sort of curious too, because she's not only is she clever, she's also sort of a violin prodigy, which in my mind, sometimes those two things, the kind of kid who might escape from a an armed robber isn't always necessarily the kid I would think of as the violin prodigy. So she's got a nice kind of she's a bit of a contradiction, which is fun too.
Yeah.
Was there
Yeah.
was it your own children who inspired you to write
No,
Beatrix?
neither one of my children are musical at all. But I I wanted to create a kid who, on the one hand, was maybe was brave, like you said. She does a couple of things, and she's smart. She escapes. She, manages to not necessarily save herself, but definitely, cause a ruckus in the whole kidnapping plans for sure. Um, but I also wanted somebody who was, like for the mother, and this is me putting in myself in Jade's shoes, I mean, on the one hand, you want your kid to escape and you want them to do these maybe reckless things,
Right.
but only if they're going to work, right?
Right.
So how terrifying is that if you're tied to a chair and you see your daughter
Right.
walking down the hall, you're like, run,
Right.
Right.
It
So
absolutely, yeah.
I wanted to give her, kind of maybe too much bravery
Mhm.
for the reader and for the mother. But she's a smart kid, and she's got it figured out for sure.
And she pulls
She
it
was
off.
fun.
I can imagine she was, and the funny thing about it is I feel like we really got to know her, but we're never in her point of view. So it
No.
isn't as though we're inside her head, but from her behavior and the things she does right from the moment they're in the kitchen, she's
Yeah.
already thinking. And so it was super, super clever. So let's talk a little bit now about the sort of more the grayer characters in the book, because Cam, who is a successful restaurateur that's a big man in Atlanta, and he definitely he's not as Jade is our, well, for one, like you said, if Cam were in the house with the kids, his sort of goal would be very straightforward. Unfortunately, he's not in the house with the kids. He's trying to drum up $734,296, which is a
Yeah.
very specific
Yes.
sum, and maybe you want to touch on that. But talk to me a little bit about sort of in developing a character who has done maybe not everything quite right, but we also are rooting for him, because if he
Right.
doesn't pull through, our other protagonists are in trouble. How did you
Hmm.
develop Cam?
Well, so, one of the big themes in this story is money, having it, not having it, needing
Yeah.
it. And so I knew going in that I wanted Cam to maybe be a little too focused on the outward appearance of having money. And that's
Mhm.
partly why I gave him the, job that I did. He's, running this, he's kind of a celebrity chef around town. He's
Mhm.
running multiple steak restaurants. Everybody knows him as the Steak King. And,
Yeah.
so he's very visible, which, I also did on purpose for this story, because of course you're not, if you're going to kidnap and hold a family for ransom, you're going to choose someone who you think has that kind of money lying around.
Right.
But as it turns out, Cam, of course, doesn't. So he really has to scramble to pull together the money. And as we're, moving through the story, we also realize that he's maybe crossed some ethical lines in his business practices as well.
Mm.
And that maybe they come back to bite him during the story.
Absolutely. Um and the ransom amount, which we won't talk about because we're not giving away any spoilers here, but it was from the very get-go. When we hear the
Yeah.
amount, it makes us think, what does that relate to?
Yeah.
And it's very satisfying to find out.
Yeah. Yeah. That was actually a fun detail that I got from not such a fun source, which was a real home invasion that happened here in Atlanta. And they
Oh.
also demanded a very specific, maybe not that large, but a very specific number. And it turns out later, and I think I say this at some point in the book, it turns out later that they pulled a bank statement from their mailbox. So
Oh.
lesson number 1 is lock your mailboxes.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay. Or
Yeah.
get your statements electronically, maybe.
Right. But what I loved about using that as a detail is, automatically that this kidnapper, his name is Sebastian, he knows something about this family. There's some sort of connection, even though you don't know what it is until much later in the story. The reader knows from the minute he says that number. I mean, like, why
Right.
not ask for, a whole million? Or, I mean, what is up with
Yes,
that specific number? But he has
exactly.
a reason for it.
He does. And he's another sort of interestingly morally ambiguous character because in the end, he has some validity. So and we won't go too much for that. So I this was such a fun book, and I have to say I really do feel like your books, which is also what you're known for, in addition to your domestic suspense genre, you I think are really known for being somebody whose books just grab you, and it's a read through the night, open up, give yourself a few hours with a glass of wine or a few glasses of wine to get um to read Kimberly's book, because it definitely, you do not want to have to put it down and go shuttle children or something. That would be very frustrating.
Well, thank
um
you.
and I understand, and I'm going to give a sneak peek of your up and coming Audible original, which you co-wrote with some very talented co-writers, Vanessa Lilly, Lane Fargo, and Kate Holohan, called Young Rich Widows. And before
Yeah.
I give I know the preview of the cover reveal is coming up here, and so I'm gonna get to show it, but I want to hear first, tell us a little bit about that. What's the book
Yeah,
about?
that was such a fun project. So it's about 4 women who they're married to partners at this law firm. It's set in the 80s in Providence, Rhode Island. So we got to big shoulder pads, big hair, like the whole thing. But these women kind of inherit basically the law firm when their husbands or their partners are die in a plane crash that is under suspicion of maybe someone was tampering with the airplane. So they get thrown headfirst into all this, all their legal cases, and there's mob involved. And I mean, it's just crazy fun, over the top, 80s suspense. It was
That's
a blast to write.
I was going to say, so is this the first time you've written a book with other writers? And what was that like? It sounds really fun.
So it was the fastest book I've ever written, the
Right.
most fun book I've ever written. Basically, what we did is we hammered out an outline. Vanessa's the one who came up with the premise for the story. That was her thing. And she's the one who gathered the writers together. And we worked so well together. We hammered out an outline. And basically, the chapters go round robin. So each of us is one of the widows. And so we would do one chapter a week, but that was our goal, but then we ended up going so much faster. So each of us would write a chapter, and then we would get together and we would go through the chapters, and then we would talk through the next chapters, and then go back and write. And we just kept going until it was done. I think we wrote this book in 6 weeks.
Oh, I mean, that actually sounds like perfect kind of writing, right? Somebody who's right there in it with you. That is so fun.
Yeah.
And a little birdie told me you might be maybe thinking about doing another one. I heard that from you.
Yes. We are working on we have our outline for our next book, and we're working on our pitch right now. So and it's gonna, fun. It's the first Young Rich Widows, the one that comes out in April, follows, well, it's kind of, one of the widows is kind of the main part of the story. And then, so we have 4 books planned, basically. We know exactly, each widow gets a book.
That is so fun.
Yeah.
Well, here, I mean, check out this cover. There's neon colors, and the 80s, and there are, you have to go look at Kimberly's social media, or Vanessa, any of them. There are some really fun pictures of them dressed in their 80s gear, and it is fabulous. I'm hoping there's going to be a launch party some point where we all get to come
I hope so too.
and get dressed up
80s cocktails and put your hair up to here, tease it.
That's right. That's our generation, right? That's our teenage experience.
Exactly.
So I'm right there with you. Okay, so that's super exciting. Your co-authored project, and I hope there's another one of those. I can't wait to download it. Tell us the date again.
I think it's April 14th off the top of my head.
Okay, so middle of April, but we can look at it. I'm sure we can pre-order it on Audible. Okay.
Yes, for sure.
We'll go find that. Okay, and then aside from the widows group, what is next for Kimberly Bell?
So I just turned in book number 8 to my editor, and I am in that weird phase where you are done writing the first big draft, right? And then and waiting for edits. So it's been really awesome.
Right.
My baby dog. It's been really awesome and quiet, but at one point I'll pick it back up again as soon as she sends me her edits. But it's a book about a woman, an influencer, Instagram influencer, who has a post. She makes this kind of careless post and it goes viral, but in the worst kind of way. And basically she's getting canceled at the same time that her personal assistant goes missing. And I mean, everything just kind of goes bad from there, cracks in her marriage and her kids. And it was a lot of fun to write because it's, the whole Instagram influencer world is crazy town.
Well, and also the cancel culture. I mean, that is another super relevant phenomenon right now.
Yes.
So that sounds wonderful. So that would be coming out for us.
Like around this time next year, I would guess.
Next year. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And we'll hear more about that, I know, by following you on your social media. And so tell us now, remind us, Facebook, Instagram, website, where can we find out more about you?
Yes, I'm on all the socials. Fortunately or unfortunately, I am. All my links are on KimberlyBellBooks.com. All the socials. You can just click on the little icons, and it'll take you straight to my pages.
So fun. All right. Well, listen, Kimberly, it was wonderful to get a chance to visit with you today and hear about all the fun stuff you're doing. And I love hearing about the writing. Boy, all of those inspirations, I'm right there with you. So for more information about Kimberly, go to KimberlyBellBooks.com, and that's KimberlyBelle books.com. And you can always find me at DanielleGirard.com. And we will see you next time on Killer Women. Bye.
Yes, thank you.